The oppression of women. The women's liberation movement was widely blamed for depriving women of their femininity. Women encountered major political opposition in the 1980s from conservatives. The new right wanted to turn the clock back with respect to employment of women, abortion, and other rights. In 1990, women's groups and their allies were able to obtain legislation that challenged some funding for child care programs to the states. Oppression of poor and persons of color. With the loss of American industrial and unionized jobs during the 1970s and 1980s, increasing numbers of workers found erosion in the real value of their paychecks. Poor individuals suffered economically as a result of the cuts in social benefits and services of the American welfare state. The overall tax rates of poor and working persons increased. The oppression of immigrants. The enactment of the Immigration Act of 1965 and succeeding legislation heralded a large influx of legal immigrants to the U.S. The number of undocumented immigrants had increased to roughly 12 million persons by 2008. Many of these new immigrants worked under the unsafe and unregulated conditions that had existed for many of their predecessors. The oppression of gay men and lesbians. In the 70s, gay men and lesbians focused on winning civil rights with some success. In the 80s, they found themselves confronting AIDS. The Reagan administration was indifferent towards the epidemic of AIDS affecting the gay community. Besides fighting against AIDS, they also sought legislation in various states to outlaw discrimination and for protection of their human rights. The oppression of people with disabilities. The Rehabilitation Act of 1973 encouraged people with disabilities to fight for more rights. The Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 barred discrimination in the workplace, housing, and public accommodations. Reformers worried that the government would focus on enforcement and would fail to fund services the disabled needed to become fully fledged members of society. The oppression of children. Many children lived in poverty and/or faced challenges which were not addressed by policy. Cocaine-addicted babies, violent crime among poor youth, and poor school and inadequate education.